Hello everyone and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. Hello, FiST Chat fans. I've just had a celery and apple smoothie for breakfast. Hey,
oh,
what do you think about that?
Sounds very healthy, doesn't it?
It does.
Absolutely.
2 cups of coffee with it, but anyway.
Oh, well, we'll get on to that shortly. Before we get into it, don't forget our website, www.fistchat.com. You can get all our links there. You can subscribe to our audio via iTunes and SoundCloud and RSS audio. Just a quick note, we did have a feed burner link. We're not exactly sure how much longer that's actually going to be available because Google's cutting off access to Google Reader as an app and by extension feed burner as a RSS feed, so we may not have that going forward. So if you see that disappear in the coming weeks, then you'll know why. I think we might have mentioned that a couple of months ago too. But you can also get our episodes on YouTube, Vimeo, and Digicosm TV. Watch us there. You can interact with us on Twitter, Google Plus, and Facebook. So I'd love to hear from you. We've got our ebook, The FiST Report, at fistreport.com. Hosted on Amazon, 99 cents. Great value and helps to support the show. We've got also our supplementary content, weekly blogs, photography on Instagram and Flickr. And don't forget to, if you'd be so kind, recommend us to anyone who may be interested in our weekly discussions on film, science and technology. Now, just quickly following up from last week's episode, I actually went to see Man of Steel yesterday and we were having a chat about it before we got on. And like I mentioned in the episode last week, I suspected it was going to be generic blockbuster material, and unfortunately it turned out to be that way. And as I was mentioning before we got on, the problem is that you could see that there was a really good script and story in there, and then someone must have just said, nah, we've got to put in an hour of wall-to-wall action to satisfy who knows what, mate, the teenage audience or something. It was just a relentless, non-stop, non-breather type of thing, and it was exhausting. Like you walk out and you had to kind of gather yourself for a minute because it was a bit of a barrage of just non-stop CGI visual noise, which I wish there was a good movie in there, and it would have been a really good movie if they hadn't done that. But we've come not to expect anything less from Hollywood these days, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, thank you for saving me the $16, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, just wanted to mention quickly, more from the technology angle, we had a change of leadership this week in Australia, and it was just more interesting the use of social media, I thought, in covering the event. I don't know if you saw any of the news sites, and they were really heavily taking tweets as they were occurring, and they would even just post embed codes of Twitter feeds into their pages, and it kind of, it's all for those who are unaware, the whole politics thing at the moment's a bit of a circus anyway, but it kind of, when it plays out like that online, it's even more hilarious.
Well, it was interesting to see, Ben. I was actually online managing online chat for a live event that I was producing at the time. And just to see the explosion of tweets, retweets and modified tweets was incredible. So it was really interesting to actually be on in real time, because normally I don't bother sitting there monitoring Twitter, but that was something.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can probably come back to that at some other time. We've talked about it before, about how social media is now used for this sort of thing, and how anyone can get into the conversation, really, if it gets picked up. All right, we'll move on now. We mentioned this story briefly in one of our previous episodes about the over-caffeination of our culture and society, and we thought we'd come back to it and sort of explore it in a bit more detail. We've had, if you haven't already, feel free to go check out episode 21 of FiST Chat, The Effects of Caffeine. We had a nice dissertation about the effects of caffeine on the body. Today, though, we're going to talk about more how caffeine has become such a pervasive ingredient in so many of our foods and drinks that we consume. It's a little freaky, isn't it? That it's so pervasive. It's a bit like how sugar is added to everything, and salt. Caffeine is now showing up in drinks. Those energy drinks, they've been there for a while. Obviously, coffee, tea, chocolate. Then there's some more wacky ones, like there was one about a Wrigley's chewing gum that had the equivalent of half a cup of coffee of caffeine in it, which was subsequently withdrawn from the market. This is, and it's not. It seems to be going by, without real scrutiny, is it? It just seems to be adding to it.
I often make this point, when people talk about caffeine in the 1980s, there were people drinking 6 cups of coffee a day. Apparently it wasn't as good as the coffee that we get today that's all made by baristas wherever we go. But nonetheless, there was all this cautioning about coffee having too much caffeine intake, and obviously some of the problems associated with having too much caffeine. Yeah. And we're back there now, but with it being added to everything, I mean, it makes sense. If you're going to the trouble of making a product and getting it out there, if you want people to keep buying it, you put something addictive in it. And, I would think that's what food and drink manufacturers are doing.
So if we look at this from a biological perspective, the idea of accumulated impact, the idea that, obviously caffeine, say you're just drinking coffee, then the thing that would happen is that if you drank it every day, eventually its effect would start to not be as effective, and you would have to drink more of it to get the same effect. And eventually you end up with a sort of zero net benefit out of it, because your body's not really has sort of developed a tolerance to it. Now, if you add, in addition to drinking coffee, if you add, a couple of cans of Coke, maybe an energy drink, and all these other sorts of things, and you keep drinking that's going to be having a serious impact on your body.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, look, realistically, if you have 1 coffee a day in the morning, it's probably not going to have a huge addictive effect. It's probably more a behavioural or conditioning, addiction, rather than a physical. However, if you have some caffeine for breakfast and then some in the middle of the morning and then some just to get you through the early part of the afternoon and then just some to get you home, that's when you will build an addictive habit. And that's why quite often on some of these current affair freak shows they show people who drink, a dozen cans of Coke a day, or, are hooked on energy drinks. And they are hooked on energy drinks. I mean, the more you have, the greater the lift, the greater the come down. And there's no doubt that, today it's very easy if you drink a lot of processed or if you drink a lot of artificial drinks or soft drinks, even ones with vitamins added, and you drink or eat certain foods, you're very likely to have so much caffeine that you'll become an addict in no time, and you'll always be reaching for another pack of corn chips with caffeine in the seasoning.
Lovely. What about scientific study? I know we've mentioned before that there's a clear sort of research in terms of, say, caffeine toxicity. Like we know that if you take an X amount of caffeine, it will be not only harmful, but if you take enough of it, it could have some serious consequences.
Yeah, well, it's not even that great a dose. It's really just a little bit more than a teaspoon of pure caffeine will kill 50% of the population. So it's.
But what about in terms of an effect, a negative effect on the body, not taking like obviously that amount of caffeine, but having all of these different types of drinks and coffees and whatever, and are there impacts on overall energy levels or anything? The problem is that with scientific studies of this, and because people's bodies are all different and they will react differently to how much they take, there's no real consensus saying that caffeine's harmful or is good for you or whatever.
I think I think it's like everything in moderation. Caffeine's not an issue. I think that once for every individual, there's a threshold where once you go above, it will become deleterious. And I mean, it can put stress on you in a number of ways, but also the way in which you might take it. Particularly in sugary drinks, can have knock-on effects, in terms of health. And people can Google these sorts of effects. They're not unknown. They've been known for a long time, and I'd encourage people to look at that. I think, I wouldn't want to scare anyone, about caffeine, but there are certain things to understand about it. And one is that if once you're addicted, you will require it every day to get by. And I mean, that sounds as bad as heroin, and I guess that's a physical addiction to a drug is. So, you might not be ripping off people's bloody iPads or something like that to get by, but physically you'll be putting the same sorts of stresses that any addict has on their body. Plus, I guess the greatest problem with caffeine is we take it in a variety of ways, usually in highly processed or high sugar environments, which, as you said before, with salt, sugar, those sorts of environments, if you're taking them in that way, they will have effects on the body, especially in high levels.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that was interesting, just in reading some articles on this subject before getting into this episode today, I found that caffeine, unlike other stimulants, was used as a productivity tool. I've heard that. I've read that, and unlike say cannabis or say alcohol, where you're either doing it to affect your mood or to relax you or something like that, caffeine's actually being taken to improve your productivity.
Well, I'd take nicotine any day over caffeine, and I think I've said that before. But, I mean, caffeine will improve your productivity for an hour, but the 15-minute takes you to go and see your friendly barista and walk back to the office with a properly brewed cup of coffee, because we don't go for any of that instant stuff anymore. You don't see anyone in the workroom just mixing themselves a cup of instant to become more productive. And then, of course, you're talking a bit of chit-chat while you got your coffee. So how productive are you? I wonder. I mean, there is that rise in productivity, and it certainly does help. I mean, I saw just this week on a sign in a cafe, which I thought was mildly amusing. Coffee used to keep me awake. Now coffee keeps me alive. I think that might sum it up. I think that might sum it up for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just finally, is there a problem with our culture being so consumed by caffeine, and how pervasive it is?
Well, there is, because nobody's thinking about their usage. And look, for most adults, I'd say most adults are probably fairly safe. I mean, the behaviours will be affected, and that includes not just their moods, but also probably their buying habits might be affected by caffeine being in a lot of the products they enjoy. But the really scary thing is seeing children, and by children I mean anyone under the age of 18 who really, uses a lot of caffeine or caffeinated products. And they're there. I mean, you go to amateur sports now and you see kids whacking down cans of energy drinks, and they don't need them. They're kids. They've got loads of energy. They don't even need to warm up. They're not going to pull hamstrings or anything. And here they are tucking into stuff that they don't need. So, I guess that's a big problem. And that's something that I don't know how society will tackle.
Yeah, of course. All right, we might draw a line under that. We've just got a couple of other things that we want to throw in here. I guess it's related because it's a drink. We're going to talk about quickly now just about breakfast drinks. We caught an interesting article in The Age dealing with the idea of a liquid breakfast product where, I'm sure you would have seen them, the idea that, it's chocolate flavored or banana flavored or vanilla flavored, and it's got all the essential nutrients in it. Also, it is claimed for you to have like having a normal breakfast. The idea is you're on the go, you take this drink, you're getting all your breakfast nutrients. Now, this Age article is basically saying that the claims of what is actually in these drinks is well below what it actually should be if it was actually matching what it was claiming to do. And of course, there's other things that are not mentioned, like the inclusion of sugar and other items. Is that so? A lot of these drinks, in essence, would be just another marketing tool to, get them to be sold.
That's the unfortunate thing. Breakfast is highly personal. And everyone has a different breakfast and different take on breakfast. All the science, all the nutrition states basically very clearly that as humans, we really do require a good, healthy breakfast to get underway for the day. Not everyone agrees with that or follows those leads, but that's what's required. If you're going to take one of these drinks, that's great. If that's the way you take breakfast, probably, for most people, that will be fine. Where the issue is the marketers trying to make out these drinks as something they're not.
Yeah.
And I think that as long as you're healthy, as long as you're, not believing what's on the label is this drink is all I ever need to drink, to be an elite athlete or something like that, there's not an issue. And it wouldn't probably even matter if you had those drinks every morning. You might not be getting the amount of fiber you should, or, you might not be getting quite the right mix of nutrients, but the question is, what are you doing for the rest of the day in terms of your dietary intake? Where the problem is they're telling you this is high in fiber and it's not that high in fiber. Or they're telling you it's low in sugar and it's actually not that low in sugar.
Yeah.
And, so you're starting to have one of these drinks, as breakfast. And I mean, breakfast is very loosely defined. So, I think that sort of thing's misleading. If you say, look, this is a drink that you can have for breakfast, if you're still hungry afterwards, well, then obviously eat something else. Or, if you find it's not working for you, find another product. But it is very misleading when you tell people this is a breakfast drink in a can or in a pouch, and you won't need anything else because that's where we get into a lot of trouble with diets.
I don't know about you, Steve, but I definitely need something solid in the morning to get me going, and I don't think a drink's going to do it for me.
Well, I'll let everyone in on this on FiST Chat land is I'm not a big breakfast person at all. I never have been. Well, I was as a kid, but I'm not these days. I prefer to eat later in the morning, but that's still breakfast. That's what I mean about it being very personal.
Exactly.
I don't think there's any dietary requirement that says that you must have breakfast between 7 and 9 and it must consist of this, this, and this. We know that you need to have a good start. You must have energy in your breakfast diet whatever time of the morning you have it, which is that first meal. You must have energy in there. You must have fiber in there. And you need to have, obviously, a relatively high nutrient intake because it's your first meal for the day and the body really will benefit from a good breakfast.
Absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. So thanks again for the chat.
Anytime, FiST Chat fans, tweet us, let us know what you have for breakfast.
Oh, that'd be interesting. All right, so that's it for this week's episode. So we'll catch you next time.